The control center of Earth's Central Command was usually a place of quiet confidence and focused minds. But on that day, silence hung heavy in the air, not out of peace, but because of what had just happened. Admiral Sarah Chen stood still, her face bathed in the red emergency lighting flickering across the holographic command display. Her features, usually calm and calculating, were strained, etched with disbelief and restrained fury. The final transmission from New Haven Colony had come through only minutes earlier, and it was worse than anyone could have anticipated. "Play it again," she said, her voice steady but not without a tremble in her hand. The AI, always obedient and emotionless, complied. The room filled once again with the static-laced, desperate plea of Governor Marcus Shaw. "This is Governor Marcus Shaw of New Haven. We are under attack by Kraken forces. Their dreadnoughts have just appeared from hyperspace. Our shields they're not holding. Civilian casualties are..." A sharp burst of static cut off the rest. That was the last anyone had heard from New Haven. It had been 6 hours since that signal. Long-range surveillance had confirmed the unthinkable. New Haven, humanity's largest extrasolar colony, was gone. 3 million souls, vaporized in an instant. Atomic dust scattered in the vacuum of space where a vibrant city once thrived. A place built with hope, progress, and dreams of a peaceful future among the stars, now reduced to silence. The room remained still, stunned. Everyone inside knew what this meant, but no one wanted to be the first to speak it aloud. Admiral Chen turned to face the gathered military leadership. These were the minds behind Earth's true defensemen and women who had worked for decades in shadows, unknown to the public or the wider galaxy. She cleared her throat and spoke, each word deliberate, powerful, and absolute. "For 2 centuries, we've let the galaxy believe that humanity is weak," she said. "We let them think we were just traders, explorers, harmless colonists seeking peace. That illusion ends now." She tapped a command into her interface. Instantly, the room's primary display shifted. What filled the screen left even the most stoic commanders momentarily stunned. Shipyards, dozens of them, hidden in the asteroid belts, buried beneath the ice crusts of outer moons, camouflaged within Saturn's rings, all concealed from prying eyes, even from the closest alien observers. Each shipyard was massive, and more importantly, active. In these secret facilities lay the truth humanity had hidden since the first contact with alien species. A fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 700,000 warships, built in silence, forged in secrecy, evolved from centuries of Earth's darkest wars and deadliest technologies, now ready to be unleashed. Protocol. "Sleeping giant is now in effect," Admiral Chen declared. That phrase, so long kept in cold storage, whispered only among the highest-ranking strategists, triggered an avalanche of activity across the solar system. AI battle processors that had simulated every galactic war scenario imaginable began uploading real-time data into command networks. Orbital defense systems long thought to be obsolete roared to life. Training bunkers buried deep beneath Martian rock opened, releasing entire regiments of soldiers who had trained in secret their entire lives, preparing for a war no one believed would ever happen. On the dark side of Jupiter's moon, Ganymede, the flagship of Earth's covert fleet, the S-Nemesis, powered up for the first time. Its systems came online with a soft hum that belied its destructive power. On board, General Marcus Way, commander of the First Strike Fleet, stood silently before his command deck as the vessel's AI ran through final checks. The Nemesis was a marvel of military engineering, stealth-infused armor, next-general weaponry, and a fusion of quantum computation and human intuition. It wasn't just a ship, it was a promise that humanity was not to be trifled with. Back in Central Command, Admiral Chen's voice cut through the tension again. The Kraken Empire thinks they've dealt us a blow. They believe the destruction of New Haven has crippled our will, broken our spirit. What they've actually done is unite us like never before. And now they're going to find out who we really are. She let the words hang for a moment before issuing her next order. Activate full fleet protocol. Operation Righteous Thunder begins in 6 hours. Across every corner of the solar system, Earth's hidden war machine came alive. What had been a carefully maintained image of peace and innocence shattered in a moment. The curtain was pulled back, and the galaxy was about to see humanity for what it truly was: not just survivors, not just dreamers or explorers, but warriors forged by fire, prepared for annihilation and determined to never let it happen again. This war, the one the Kraken had unknowingly started, would not be fought for territory or power. It would be fought for memory, for vengeance, and for the survival of humanity's future. Earth would answer the destruction of New Haven not with words, but with fire. For too long, humanity had been underestimated. Ever since their emergence as a spacefaring race, the other civilizations of the galaxy had looked down upon them. Too emotional, too chaotic, too volatile. A species of artists, thinkers, and traders, certainly capable but too young, too fractured to be a real threat. But what the galaxy didn't see, what it couldn't understand, was that underneath the smiles and handshakes, behind the diplomacy and the trade agreements, humanity had never forgotten its history. They had never forgotten Hiroshima, Dresden, Stalingrad, the trenches of World War I, the nuclear brink of the Cold War, the centuries of struggle, bloodshed, and perseverance that had shaped their character. Earth had known conflict since its dawn, and though it longed for peace, it had always prepared for war. Every piece of human progress, every space station, every colonization ship, every peaceful agreement signed, was backed by the quiet hum of watchful eyes and ready hands. Every civilian innovation carried the whisper of a possible weapon hidden within. Every satellite launched had its twin, silent, stealthy, and armed. The world had believed the lie because they wanted to. They saw what humans wanted them to see. But now, the mask was off. Governor Shaw's final message wasn't just a cry for help. It was a wake-up call, a reminder that peace without preparedness is an invitation to annihilation. Admiral Chen paced slowly to the window of Central Command, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was the debris of New Haven, 3 million lives gone in a flash. She could still hear the static-laced voice of Shaw in her head. They're not here to conquer. They're here to... The message had cut off, but Chen knew what he was going to say. They're here to exterminate. But humanity would not go gently. She turned to her command staff, her voice calm and cold. We're not just going to respond, we're going to change the rules of the game. The Kraken believe they've shown us their strength. Now we're going to show them our resilience. The next hours passed like a blur. Tactical displays lit up. Commands flew across quantum channels. AI assistants delivered battle scenarios faster than any organic mind could process, and yet the human commanders kept pace. This wasn't a panic. This was controlled, fury precision wrapped in steel. And in the dark, quiet void beyond Pluto, thousands of ships began emerging from hidden docks, their engines silent to sensors, their hulls blacker than the vacuum around them. These vessels were invisible, death made manifest. The sleeping giant had awakened, and it was done pretending to be asleep. By the time the galaxy realized what was happening, it would already be too late. In every simulation run over the past century, humanity had accounted for every known species, every empire, every possible scenario. They had planned for a first strike, for occupation, for betrayal, even for extinction-level invasions. What they had not accounted for was mercy, not anymore. The destruction of New Haven had changed everything. And when the first fleet departed Earth's orbit, wave after wave of vessels, from destroyers to dreadnoughts, the war drums that echoed weren't just metal against metal against metal. They were the heartbeat of an ancient species finally standing tall, not just to fight, but to reclaim the stars. The stars never looked so quiet. In the cold, endless void of space, silence could be deceiving. It masked what was coming, something colossal, calculated, and entirely unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The Kraken Empire believed they had won. They thought the destruction of New Haven would cripple Earth's morale, sever its reach among the stars, and prove once and for all that humanity was just another weak, overreaching species. They were dead wrong. From deep within the solar system, in places even the most advanced alien probes had never detected, the real Earth fleet began to emerge. Not the ceremonial crafts shown at diplomatic summits or the mining vessels charting asteroid belts. These were ghost ships, sleek, dark, and almost predatory in design, with hulls that absorbed rather than reflected light. They had no transponders, no visible propulsion trails, no electromagnetic signatures. They moved like whispers through the dark. On board the flagship Nemesis, General Marcus Way stood with his arms crossed behind his back, observing the synchronized dance of warships as they positioned themselves in the staging corridors just beyond Jupiter. Each craft had emerged from hiding fully operational and combat-ready. This was not a scramble. It was a well-rehearsed ritual that had waited centuries for activation. "All ships report online and combat-capable," said the AI tactician, Kali 3, her voice crisp and neutral. "We are now fully synced with Operation Righteous Thunder protocols, awaiting Phase 1 initiation." Wei gave a slight nod. Let's make history. What the Kraken had failed to grasp was not just humanity's capacity to fight, but their relentless ability to prepare. They didn't realize that every quiet outpost and hidden asteroid had been part of a long game strategy. Every scientist working on dark matter propulsion, every soldier training in gravity simulations, every covert AI engineer testing neural synchronization platforms, they were all building the future. A future not of survival, but dominance. Not of defense, but precision war. And now, that future had arrived. The first engagement came not with a grand speech, but a single maneuver, Battle Pattern Omega. From a tactical perspective, it made no sense. The ships moved not in predictable arcs, but in a fluid geometry that adapted with every microsecond. What looked like chaos was actually a living equation, each vessel part of a larger intelligence, AI and human minds linked via quantum entanglement. They didn't communicate in words or signals. They operated on a shared intent. The Kraken weren't prepared. Their dreadnoughts, massive and imposing, formed a classic defense sphere around a key hyperspace relay station. It was a textbook tactic, and utterly useless. The human ships approached like wraiths, silent, invisible to Kraken sensors until they were already inside the perimeter. By the time the Empire's flagship initiated countermeasures, half of its fleet was already being torn apart. The Phase 1 weapons package was unlike anything in galactic warfare. Humanity hadn't just built better lasers or stronger shields. They had built tools that defied physics, or at least manipulated it in ways that hadn't been thought possible. Quantum disruptors sliced through space-time like razors, destabilizing localized fields and collapsing shielding systems entirely. One moment, a Kraken cruiser stood defiant behind its energy barrier. The next, it was nothing but molten debris. Gravitational lenses bent nearby starlight into directed energy beams, focusing unimaginable amounts of force onto enemy vessels, vaporizing them before they could even process the threat. Then came the nanite swarms, self-replicating, adaptive, and utterly terrifying. They didn't explode. They didn't fire. They simply dismantled layer by layer, atom by atom, until nothing was left but dust. The Kraken High Admiral Krix stood aboard his flagship, surrounded by a holographic tactical display that had gone from red alert to full-blown collapse. Ships were blinking out of existence. Their battle formations were unraveling. The data made no sense. These weapons they're learning. His tactical officer stammered. Each time they hit our shields, they adapt. Our defenses are becoming obsolete mid-battle. Krix felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. They had underestimated them. Humans, yes. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't just war. It was evolution in real time. Back aboard the Nemesis, General Wei received an incoming communication from Admiral Sarah Chen. Kraken reinforcements inbound in 30 minutes, she reported. Make sure they understand the full extent of their mistake. He didn't need to be told twice. Initiate Protocol Prometheus, Wei ordered. Immediately, every ship in the human fleet adjusted formation. The AI synchronized their drives. What happened next was a moment of cosmic poetry. Ships rearranging themselves in a three-dimensional matrix so complex it appeared like a fractal spinning in space. Then, every vessel simultaneously activated its quantum synchronization field. The effect was devastating. The space around the Kraken fleet twisted into a chaotic web of gravitational anomalies and spatial distortions. Ships that tried to flee found themselves looped back into their own firing zones. Navigation systems failed. Weapons misfired. The very laws of physics no longer worked the same from 1 kilometer to the next. Humanity had turned space itself into a weapon. Then, General Wei did something unheard of. He opened a direct line to every Kraken ship within range. This is General Marcus Wei of the Earth Space Force. His voice echoed across alien comms. You destroyed one of our colonies, believing us weak. You judged us by the image we presented to the galaxy. You assumed we were behind in military development. That was your first mistake. He paused, letting the silence hang. Your second mistake was believing our strength lay in our ships and weapons. It doesn't. Our strength is in our preparation, our foresight, our willingness to adapt and overcome any threat. Every treaty we signed, every scientific breakthrough we shared, every peaceful moment we were preparing for this day. The Kraken ships, ensnared in the quantum web, could do nothing but listen. Then came the killing blow. Each human warship charged its main weapon, not one by one, all at once. The synchronized release of energy across thousands of ships created a cascading shockwave that didn't just destroy it, erased. The Kraken Armada, once the pride of a 10,000-year empire, was reduced to particles in under 20 seconds. Only one Kraken ship, Admiral Krix's flagship, was spared, deliberately. It limped away, carrying the horror of what it had witnessed. It wasn't spared out of mercy. It was spared as a message. Phase 1 complete, Wei said coldly. Prepare for Phase 2. We're taking the fight to them. The Kraken Empire had woken a sleeping giant. But what they hadn't realized was that the giant wasn't just awake. He was fully armed, fully prepared, and already moving forward with absolute resolve. Back on Earth, in the solar command net, data flowed like never before. Every engagement fed real-time tactical updates into Earth's Nexus system, a vast neural battle grid powered by quantum AI hubs distributed across the inner solar system. The result? Every human ship learned from every other ship's battle in real time. Strategies evolved, weapons adjusted, and formations rebalanced faster than any living mind could comprehend. No other civilization had ever attempted such a thing. The level of coordination was beyond artificial intelligence. It was the fusion of human instinct and machine optimization. The galaxy had no defense for it. What the Kraken thought would be a war turned into something entirely different. Their infrastructure, communication relays, fuel depots, supply corridors began disappearing in precision strikes. Not bombarded randomly, but surgically removed from the grid. The Kraken military began to suffocate not from combat, but from collapse. Even their homeworld, Center Prime, began to feel the tension. It was no longer just about firepower. It was about inevitability. The Kraken had ruled through fear. They believed in brute dominance. Humanity believed in outthinking the enemy, and they were proving that intelligence, patience, and preparedness were infinitely more lethal than raw strength. General Wei stood once more before the central console of the Nemesis, watching the fractal waves of war ripple outward. In every direction, Earth's forces pressed forward not chaotically, but deliberately, like chess pieces advancing across 100 boards at once. What had started as a tragedy, a massacre at New Haven, was transforming into a redefinition of galactic power. And it was only the beginning. The Kraken Empire was ancient. For 10,000 years, its grip on the galaxy had been firm, unyielding, and absolute. Its vast fleets controlled hyperspace lanes. Its governors ruled with brutal efficiency over thousands of worlds. Fear was its currency, obedience, its product. And yet, as its proud military crumbled in real time before the human onslaught, something far more dangerous to the Kraken was happening. Hope was spreading. In the high command war room of Center Prime, Supreme Overlord Vexal stood motionless, tentacles twitching in disbelief as the live tactical displays before him showed a collapse that no one in the Empire had believed possible. The screens flashed red. Dots representing Kraken military installations blinked out by the dozen. Entire defense sectors had gone silent. But the worst part wasn't just the destruction, it was the precision of it all. "They're not just attacking our fleets," reported Corin, his chief strategic advisor. "They're dismantling our infrastructure, targeting relay nodes, supply depots, and hyperspace beacons with surgical accuracy." Vexal narrowed his lidless eyes. No species should be capable of such operational reach. How did we not detect this level of preparation? Before Corin could respond, another alarm flared across the room. New flashes on the tactical map. This time, in 30 different sectors, simultaneously. A synchronized strike. The humans were everywhere. The AI servers struggled to classify what was happening. The Kraken military had faced rebellion before, pirates, insurgents, rogue planets. But this was not rebellion. It was annihilation cloaked in coordination. Every human fleet employed a unique tactic tailored to the weaknesses of that sector. Their movements showed intimate knowledge of Kraken defense protocols as if they'd been designed with them in mind. And they had. On board the Hyperion, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a shimmering command hologram, watching the full-scale implementation of Operation Hybra. It was a plan crafted decades ago, for a moment just like this. And now, it was executing itself through thousands of autonomous but coordinated warships. Probability of successful counter-tactics, 17.7, reported Prometheus, the ship's quantum AI. Chen raised an eyebrow. That's generous. She turned to her bridge crew. Initiate Phase 3. Back in Kraken space, chaos escalated. But for the first time in living memory, it wasn't just the military facing defeat. The Kraken's once stable society, built on coercion and strict hierarchy, was beginning to splinter. Word was spreading not just of the devastating human strikes, but of what came after. The humans weren't just destroying military targets. They were offering a choice. As Kraken fleets were pulled from the outer rim in desperation to defend their core sectors, they left behind the hundreds of lesser species that made up the Empire's backbone subject worlds, long oppressed and taxed into submission. The Kraken had never bothered to form alliances with them. They saw them as tools, labor, and cannon fodder. But the humans didn't. Wherever the Kraken military presence faded, human diplomatic ships arrived in its place. They came not with threats, but with open channels and real offers: protection, technological exchange, medical support, autonomy, freedom, and the species listened. On the planet Novari Prime, the locals, once forbidden even from accessing interstellar tech, gathered in their capital square as a human envoy broadcast images of newly liberated worlds. They saw former slave species voting in open councils. They saw once oppressed peoples now studying medicine, engineering, and astronavigation in academies built with Earth's help. They saw not just survival but advancement. Hope, once a myth, had become contagious. One by one, systems declared independence from the Kraken, not with weapons, but with words. Whole sectors went dark, not from defeat, but from deliberate choice to no longer be part of a decaying empire. And with every world that left, the Kraken lost more than territory. They lost control. They lost the illusion of invincibility that had sustained them for millennia. On Earth, Chen and her leadership team monitored the fallout, not from a throne, but from a command net that spanned dozens of species and cultures now working together in real time. Reports indicate 71 new systems have declared neutrality or Earth Alliance status in the last 48 hours, Prometheus reported. Make sure they get our full support packages, Chen said. Medical aid, supply chains, and educational hubs go out immediately. This wasn't just about winning battles. This was about reshaping what power meant in the galaxy. In conference after conference, the human diplomats shared their strategy not to rule the galaxy, but to transform it. They weren't building an empire. They were cultivating a network interconnected, cooperative, and built on mutual benefit. Unlike the Kraken's rigid domination model, the humans operated on trust and contribution. Every planet added to the coalition brought with it knowledge, culture, and innovation. And while Kraken generals scrambled to predict Earth's next move, Earth had already shifted the battlefield. It wasn't just in the stars anymore. It was in the minds of the people, in the hearts of every species that realized for the first time they didn't have to live in fear. Vexal tried to issue orders for a counter-campaign. He tried to rally remaining loyal forces for a counter-offensive, but they didn't come. Not because they were destroyed, but because they had nothing left to fight for. Even his own officers, once loyal to a fault, began to hesitate. Some requested reassignment, others disappeared. When the final communications came from the Outer Rim, they weren't military status updates. They were requests for help from former enemies, now turning to humanity for support, not subjugation. In the command center of the S-Nemesis, General Marcus Way received reports from human diplomatic vessels parked at newly independent worlds. They're asking for teaching modules, clean energy infrastructure, and open data libraries, said the AI. Way allowed himself a rare, quiet smile. Send it all, he said. He understood what was happening. The Kraken weren't losing the war because they were weak. They were losing because they had never built anything worth defending. Their strength had always been borrowed from the fear of others. And once that fear vanished, so did their power. Earth's strength came not from its weapons, though they were unmatched, but from its capacity to adapt, to imagine a better world, and then to build it, even in the face of loss. Back on Centaur Prime, the palace of the Kraken High Command was a shell of what it once was. Where once there were advisors, now there were whispers. Where once there was certainty, now there was silence. Overlord Vexal stood before his central display as the remaining planets under his control blinked off the network, one by one. Karin, now haggard and disillusioned, entered the room. Another 12 systems have signed treaties with Earth's alliance, he said quietly. We have no response ships left. No safe hyperspace corridors. And now, even our reserves are standing down. Vexal didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was written across every blinking alert on the display. The Empire was gone, not through total conquest, but because no one believed in it anymore. They've weaponized hope, Corin said. And Vexal, the most feared leader in the galaxy for centuries, finally whispered, and we never learned how to fight that. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen received a secure transmission from Dr. Elena Santos, Earth's chief diplomatic strategist. Her holographic form appeared before the command board. The transformation is accelerating, Santos reported. Our infrastructure programs are live in over 300 liberated systems. Trade networks are forming without tariffs or coercion. Cultures are exchanging ideas instead of suppressing them. The galaxy's never seen anything like this. Chen nodded. Because we didn't just prepare for war, she said. We prepared for what comes after, and this was the most dangerous thing Earth had ever created. Not a weapon, not a warship, but an idea. The idea that freedom could replace fear, that knowledge could beat control, that unity could replace domination, and it was spreading faster than any fleet ever could. The Kraken Empire had always believed that power resided in ships, weapons, and fear. Their dominance over the galaxy had been built on overwhelming military might, swift retribution, and absolute control over every system within their reach. For 10,000 years, this approach had worked. They had no challengers, no rivals strong enough to defy them. So when Earth rose quietly on the galactic horizon, speaking softly and acting humbly, the Kraken dismissed them as irrelevant, a young species playing at civilization. But what they didn't realize, what not even their most paranoid strategists could predict, was that Earth was never preparing for conquest. It was preparing for survival. And in that preparation, humanity had constructed not just a war machine, but something far more complex and far more dangerous. A network. Not of satellites, not of supercomputers, but of people, of minds, of cultures, of empathy and precision planning woven together into a system of understanding unlike anything the galaxy had seen. On board the S. Athena, Admiral Sarah Chen stood with Dr. Elena Santos, Earth's chief diplomatic strategist, reviewing the latest intelligence from across Kraken space. It wasn't battle reports that filled the display. It was data, political fracture points, economic dependencies, regional power structures, species-specific historical grievances, Centuries of study, thousands of diplomatic simulations, hundreds of cultural audits, all culminating in the execution of Phase 4 of Earth's master strategy. "We never fought the Kraken on their terms," Santos said quietly, her holographic form flickering with real-time updates. "They thought we were just another militarized species aiming for dominance. But we never wanted the throne. We wanted something deeper." Chen nodded, eyes locked on a live feed from a newly liberated planet. Once a fortress world for the Kraken Navy, it now hosted a gathering of planetary leaders, most of whom had been enemies just months ago now, sitting at the same table, drafting a cooperative governance charter with human mediators. "They never understood what we were really building," Chen replied. "We studied them, every law, every policy, every weakness. While they obsessed over firepower, we built resilience. And we built it everywhere. From the moment Earth made first contact with the galactic community. Every move, every treaty, every alliance was part of a greater design. While humanity appeared to lag behind in military advancement, that was the deception. They were focusing on something else, something the Kraken had neglected for millennia. Relationships. Back on Earth, in the subterranean Nexus hub buried beneath the Andes, massive quantum computing systems processed more than battle telemetry. They absorbed cultural trends, tracked ideological shifts, and anticipated not just where conflicts would arise, but how to prevent them. Anthropologists, linguists, and behavioral economists worked alongside tacticians and AI engineers, crafting plans that didn't just neutralize threats, they turned former enemies into allies. The Kraken Empire had ruled through terror. Earth was dismantling that empire by offering something better: purpose, progress, and partnership. One of the key strategic components to this was the Silent Initiative, a decades-long covert program that quietly embedded human outreach vessels among Kraken's most subjugated worlds. Disguised as trade envoys, research shuttles, or even civilian observers, these vessels weren't there to spy or sabotage. They were there to listen. They listened to stories of oppression. They mapped patterns of systemic abuse. They gathered data not just on military logistics, but on cultural wounds, languages being erased, traditions being outlawed, voices being silenced. These silent observers created detailed empathy profiles for every enslaved species within the Kraken system. What they wanted, what they feared, what they dreamed of. When Earth's fleets finally launched, those ships didn't just bring weapons. They brought answers. To the Nelleri, who had been denied medical advancement for centuries, Earth brought gene therapy and clean hospitals. To the Forians, whose histories had been rewritten by Kraken propaganda, Earth delivered archival restorations and open communication channels. To the Zaleks, long forced into military conscription, Earth offered peaceful labor, integration, and economic incentives. Every engagement was dual-purposed. Every planetary liberation had a civilian protocol attached to it. Human aid workers arrived on the heels of military victories carrying tools, not guns. Engineers set up solar arrays while diplomats established transitional governments. Doctors taught local healers. Teachers opened schools within days of liberation. And behind it all, Earth's AI systems ensured that every deployment was perfectly timed and precisely resourced. In essence, Earth wasn't waging a war. It was orchestrating a revolution. And nowhere was this more evident than on the planet Arxon E2. Once a major hub of Kraken fleet logistics, Arxon 2 had been known for its brutal labor camps and endless mining operations. When Earth's forces arrived, they didn't flatten the planet's infrastructure. They surgically dismantled the military garrisons and then activated their true asset, a civilian transition corps trained for post-authoritarian stabilization. Within 2 weeks, Arxon II's slave population had formed their first provisional council. Within a month, Earth's engineers had replaced the collapsing transport system with gravity rail lines. Within 3 months, the planet's former prison blocks were converted into learning centers. And within half a year, Arxon II was producing not war materials, but advanced nanomaterials for civilian technologies shared freely with the rest of the liberated worlds. The Kraken watched in horror as planet after planet fell not just from firepower but from belief, from the realization that the galaxy could be different. In the depths of Kraken High Command, Overlord Vexal slammed a clawed fist into the command table as another report came in, not of defeat, but of defection. "They're not just winning," he hissed. "They're rewriting everything." "Yes," Corin whispered, "because they studied us. But more than that, they studied them." It wasn't just Kraken weaknesses that Earth had analyzed. It was the dreams and values of every silenced species, every repressed people. Earth's strength wasn't just in understanding war, it was in understanding people. Back aboard the S. Athena, Dr. Santos turned from the display to address her global strategic team. "We are entering the cultural phase," she said. "This is where we consolidate, where we turn liberation into sustainable community. And where we offer them more than just freedom, we offer them purpose." One of her aides asked the obvious question. "How do we sustain this? We can't govern thousands of worlds." "Exactly," Santos replied. "And we don't want to. We never did." The strategy was never about replacing the Kraken Empire with an Earth Empire. That would have been repeating the same mistake. Earth's long-term vision was something different, a federation, not ruled by one, but cooperatively led by many. A web of interconnected species, sharing knowledge, maintaining mutual defense, and embracing cultural exchange without assimilation or hierarchy. To build this, Earth had to win not just hearts but minds. They had to show that diversity wasn't a threat, it was a strength. So they embedded cultural exchange programs in every liberated sector. They established language preservation archives, allowing species to reclaim their linguistic heritage. They funded joint innovation grants, encouraging mixed species teams to co-create technologies that served mutual needs. They even created the Galactic Education Network, a unified platform where children from different worlds could learn side by side through holographic classrooms that adapted to each species' unique cognitive models. All of this was backed, not by military command, but by civilian governance groups. Earth's diplomats remained facilitators, not overlords. And in doing so, they earned something no army could ever win: loyalty. When the Kraken Empire tried to reassert control over a liberated system, they were met not just by human fleets, but by local planetary defenses, created by and for the newly freed species themselves. These weren't puppet governments, these were true partners, and the Kraken realized, too late, that they had lost not to Earth, but to an idea that peace could be protected without tyranny. That power didn't need to dominate. That progress wasn't limited to the strong. In a secure quantum conference, the Earth Command Council met to assess the next stage. "They expected us to behave like them," Chen said. "To conquer, to dominate, to demand obedience. But we offered partnership," Santos finished. "And that, above all, was the difference. The Kraken built an empire on obedience and fear. Humanity was building a new galactic order on understanding and collaboration." As the conference concluded, one final report came in from a world outside Kraken space entirely. A species no human had ever encountered sent a petition to join Earth's alliance. They had watched from afar, seen the transformation, and wanted to be part of something bigger. Chen smiled quietly. The Kraken thought the war ended when their fleets fell. But the real victory was happening now in every lab, in every school, in every cultural hall across the stars. They never understood that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their firepower. It was their understanding of what came next. 5 years ago, the skies over New Haven burned. 3 million voices were silenced in a single act of unprovoked violence. The Kraken Empire had believed that by wiping out humanity's most advanced colony, they would cripple Earth's ambitions and strike terror into the hearts of its people. But instead, they triggered something they never expected. A war. Yes, but more than that. They awakened a force that had been preparing in silence, in shadow, and in strategy. The retaliation was swift, precise, and unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed before. But the aftermath, that was the true revolution. What began as retribution had transformed into a blueprint for something far greater. Not a galactic empire, not a human-dominated order, but a shared alliance built not on conquest, but on cooperation, mutual respect, and shared progress. On the newly constructed New Haven Memorial Space Station, now orbiting the very coordinates where the original colony once thrived, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the observation window. Crystalline spires stretched into the cosmos behind her, their facets catching starlight and refracting it in radiant patterns across the vast observation deck. It wasn't just a monument, it was a symbol of survival, a symbol of transformation, a symbol of unity. Behind her, dozens of ships from 100 different worlds passed through the bustling transit lanes outside. Where once there had been only Kraken warships enforcing the iron rule of the Empire, now there was a flow of trade, dialogue, and cultural exchange. The spaceways were alive with life, diverse, interconnected, and vibrant in a way that the galaxy had never known. Have you seen the latest transmission from the Galactic Development Council? Dr. Alina Santos asked as she joined Chen, her holographic form shimmering softly beside her. I did, Chen replied, eyes never leaving the stars. It's hard to believe. It's real. Santos smiled. 12 new worlds formally integrated this week alone. Some were never even under Kraken control. They just watched what we built, and now they want to be part of it. Chen didn't respond immediately. She simply watched a child's drawing. Projected into the sky above the memorial, a rotating hologram of stars with hand-drawn images of children from 12 different species holding hands around a globe. Something so simple yet profoundly impossible just a few years earlier. When they destroyed New Haven, Chen said quietly, they thought they were ending something. What they really did was give birth to a future that never could have existed otherwise. And it was true. The Kraken Empire, for all its military might, had never offered anything beyond obedience. There were no trade partnerships, no mutual scientific ventures, no education exchanges. The Empire took, controlled, and silenced. It was built to suppress, not to thrive. But Earth had taken a different path. In the years following the Kraken's collapse, humanity had made it clear they weren't interested in becoming new rulers. Instead, they were facilitators, architects of collaboration. They helped rebuild not in their image, but in partnership with the people who had suffered most on the former Kraken homeworld of Center Prime, now under joint governance by the Federation Council. Old military installations had been converted into research centers, cultural museums, and medical hubs. Children who once lived in fear now attended schools funded by Earth and taught by educators from dozens of planets. Artists painted freely. Scientists collaborated openly. The very planet that once symbolized tyranny now embodied something entirely different. Hope. Back on the Athena-class diplomatic cruiser SV Polaris, orbiting a liberated world in Sector 7 Rho, Ambassador Jalen Morrow stood before a council of representatives. The room was filled with species of all shapes and sizes, once enemies, now allies. "We're not asking you to abandon your traditions," Morrow said. "We're asking you to bring them to the table. That's how this alliance works. Your voice matters. Your culture matters. Your history matters." An elder from the Zarathian clans, a species that had been enslaved by the Kraken for generations, slowly rose. "And if we disagree? If our ways conflict, then we talk," Morrow replied, "not fight. We listen. We learn. We find the best way forward together." There was a long pause. Then the elder bowed slightly. "Then let us build this future. Not in your image, but in all of ours." That sentiment echoed across thousands of star systems. What Earth had done was more than military strategy. It was philosophical engineering. They had replaced the galactic paradigm of us versus them with something radical. Us with them. Their warships, once the terrifying tip of the spear, had become guarantors of peace. They patrolled not to dominate but to protect trade routes, support disaster relief, and deter rising threats. Humanity had become a stabilizing force, not by demand, but by trust earned. And trust was the hardest currency to build in a galaxy so scarred by war and betrayal. But Earth had paid the price in full. Every station built, every alliance forged, every technology shared came with no strings attached. Every world was treated as equal, regardless of past affiliations or cultural complexity. Human scientists opened their research archives. Human engineers trained locales to develop their own infrastructure. And perhaps most importantly, human stories were shared openly, tales of struggle, injustice, redemption, and determination. Because while the galaxy saw Earth's fleets, it was Earth's resilience that won hearts. They shared the story of New Haven not as propaganda, but as a memory, a reminder that great pain can lead to great purpose. Each year, on the anniversary of New Haven's fall, the Memorial Station hosted a galactic gathering. Survivors, descendants, and newcomers alike lit the remembrance fires, one flame for each of the 3 million lives lost. But after the silence, there was celebration, not of death, but of rebirth. Songs were sung in hundreds of languages. Dances performed by species once forbidden to express their culture. Scientists gave talks on recent breakthroughs born from cooperative research. Children played games across species, laughing under holographic auroras cast into the dome above. It wasn't just a memorial anymore. It was a celebration of everything that had been built in the ashes. In the council chambers of Earth's Federation Council, no longer a Terran-only body, but now housing representatives from over 300 worlds. The discussion was no longer about war. It was about sustainability, long-term diplomatic structure, and the ethical integration of AI across civilizations. And at the center of it all was one core truth. Humanity didn't win by being stronger. They won by preparing for something better. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just retaliation, but restoration. Not just protection, but peace. In the closing moments of that year's memorial, Admiral Chen stood before the crowd and delivered a speech broadcast across all known space. "To those who died at New Haven," she began, her voice carrying the weight of countless memories, "you did not die in vain. Your sacrifice showed us who we truly were and what we could become. We thought we were preparing for war. In truth, we were preparing to remake the galaxy." She paused, letting the silence settle. For 10,000 years, the Kraken ruled through fear. Today, we rule nothing, but we offer something they never could: a future worth sharing. Behind her, the display lit up with images from every world that had joined the new galactic alliance, once fractured, now connected. Not a human empire, a federation of equals, diverse and powerful, not because they were the same, but because they were different, and chose to walk forward together. The speech ended in thunderous applause, not choreographed, not obligated, but earned. And as the ceremony gave way to shared meals, performances, and mingling of cultures once at war, something was clear. The warships may have won the battle, but it was the vision, the idea, that won the galaxy. 5 years had passed since the skies over New Haven turned to fire. Time hadn't erased the grief, but it had transformed it. What began as the worst tragedy in humanity's interstellar history had become the cornerstone of something much greater: a galactic rebirth. The New Haven Memorial Space Station hung in orbit over the ruins of the original colony, its crystalline spires shimmering like frozen fire in the starlight. It wasn't just a monument to the 3 million souls lost in the Kraken assault, it was the beating heart of a new era. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the Grand Hall's panoramic observatory deck, her eyes scanning the flow of ships passing through nearby transit lanes. These weren't military vessels bristling with weaponry. They were freighters, research ships, humanitarian relief cruisers, and cultural exchange platforms flying under banners from 100 worlds. Once enemies, now allies. Once broken, now building. "They're calling it the New Dawn," said General Marcus Way as he approached her, his holographic form hovering beside her in crisp uniform. "Even the old Kraken territories have adopted the term." Chen offered a small smile, poetic, coming from the ashes of so much death. "It's more than poetry," he replied. "It's reality. The last Kraken holdout surrendered this morning. The transition is complete. The Empire is gone." It was true. The once feared Kraken regime, which had ruled through brutality and dominance for 10,000 years, no longer existed, not because it had been annihilated by fire, but because it had been outgrown. It had been replaced not with another empire, but with a federated unity of liberated worlds, cooperative governments, and shared progress. Earth had not risen to become a conqueror. It had become a catalyst. Dr. Elena Santos, the architect of Earth's diplomatic strategy, appeared beside them. Though she remained planet-bound on Earth, her presence was felt in every major system, from the innermost colonies to the farthest liberated worlds. "Have you seen the development metrics from the Proxima cluster?" she asked. "Access to education, healthcare, and clean energy has tripled in under 2 years. That region used to be Kraken breeding grounds for their conscript armies." Wei nodded. "Now it's producing engineers, teachers, and cultural historians. They're even opening their own university next month," Santos added. "Named after New Haven." That name, New Haven, meant something different now. To the survivors, it would always carry a wound. But to the galaxy, it had become a rallying cry, a symbol, a promise that even in the darkest hour, resilience, unity, and compassion could forge something better. The Grand Hall filled quickly as representatives from every sector of the galaxy arrived for the annual Commemoration ceremony. Delegates from former Kraken subject species stood beside human officers. Children from across worlds laughed and played in shared spaces, speaking in blended dialects once banned under Imperial rule. Holographic displays throughout the station broadcast images of the galaxy's transformation worlds once ravaged by conquest, now blooming with culture and collaboration. At the center of the hall stood a vast circular flame, the eternal beacon lit every year in honor of those lost in the initial attack. Around it, descendants of New Haven's citizens placed handwritten notes, poems, relics, and tributes. The fire never dimmed. It was powered by solar collectors on the station's outer hull, symbolizing a simple truth. Even the darkest void could be lit by collective will. As the ceremony began, Admiral Chen took the podium. 5 years ago today, she began, our colony at New Haven fell silent. It was an act meant to break us to silence not just 3 million voices, but the hope of a rising civilization. Instead, it became the spark that lit a revolution. Not just of war, but of ideas. She paused, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber, and through every broadcast relay tuned into the live stream across known space. We mourned. We fought. We survived. And then we chose to build. Not just for ourselves, but for all those who had lived under fear for far too long. She gestured toward the display behind her. Images shifted across the screen. Kraken war factories now converted into research centers, battlecruisers repurposed for interstellar rescue, and cities once patrolled by enforcers now filled with laughter, markets, and public forums. In these last 5 years, we have not simply rebuilt, she continued. We've reimagined. We've redefined what it means to share a galaxy. The crowd responded with a quiet, reverent hush. Our greatest weapon, Chen said, was never our warships. It was never our technology. It was our ability to transform, to turn tragedy into movement, fear into strength, and enemies into friends. She stepped aside, and a series of speakers took the stage. Survivors, diplomats, engineers, students, and even reformed Kraken officers who had joined the new order. One by one, they spoke of the years since the war, of the rebuilding efforts, the breakthroughs, and the bonds that now connected worlds that had once only known conquest. By the time the final speaker, a child of mixed species heritage, recited a poem in 3 interwoven languages, the hall was silent, eyes wet, hearts stirred. Afterward, Chen, Santos, and Wei stood once more at the observatory. You know what's incredible? Santos said. We spent centuries preparing for war, and yet in the end, what we built was the foundation for peace. Wei chuckled softly. If someone had told me 5 years ago that the greatest monument to our war effort would be a galactic school system, I would have thought they were crazy. It's poetic justice, Chen said. The Kraken tried to silence a generation, and now we've empowered 1,000 more. As the stars rotated in the sky outside, the observation deck lit up with real-time images from across the known galaxy. On a desert world, a clean water plant opened with cheering crowds. On a former Kraken fortress moon, a musical festival blended ancient tribal traditions with off-world instruments. On a space station orbiting a once forbidden mining planet, students from 5 species performed a collaborative science presentation to a cheering audience. This wasn't an empire. This was a renaissance. But it had come at a cost. And no one, least of all the survivors of New Haven, would ever forget that. Later that evening, as the stars above shimmered, Chen stood alone before the eternal beacon. She placed a small metal fragment, a recovered piece of the original New Haven colonial beacon, into the memory vault beneath the flame. For the ones we lost, she whispered. Behind her, a child approached. A little girl, perhaps 8 years old, with bright green eyes and skin that shifted color every few seconds in soft pulses. a hybrid child. The future, incarnate. Admiral, she asked, do you really think something good came from New Haven being destroyed? Chen turned, gently kneeling to meet the child's eye level. No good ever comes from that kind of pain, she said slowly. But what we choose to do after, that's what matters. The girl tilted her head. So, it's like planting a tree after a fire? Chen smiled, touched by the simplicity and the wisdom. Yes, she said. Exactly like that. The little girl nodded, satisfied. Then she skipped off to join the others, laughing, as she disappeared into the crowd. Chen stood for a moment longer, her mind returning to Earth, to the scorched cities of the past. The conflicts of old, the dark chapters of humanity's own history, and then forward again, to this new page being written, not just for her people, but for the entire galaxy. Real-world reflection. The lesson of New Haven, though fictional, the story of New Haven reflects something deeply human and deeply real. History is full of examples where tragedy births transformation. Wars that gave way to peace accords, oppression that gave rise to civil rights, disasters that sparked innovation, compassion, and solidarity. What New Haven teaches is that our response to darkness defines who we are. It reminds us that vengeance may win a battle, but vision, unity, and hope win the future. In a world increasingly divided, where conflict seems inevitable and differences often fuel distance, the legacy of New Haven whispers something ancient and profound. The answer is not to conquer, but to connect. Not to dominate, but to listen. To build, to grow together. Because even from ashes, something beautiful can rise if we have the courage to imagine and the compassion to act. And that is the kind of legacy worth remembering forever.